Good morning. My name is Georgette Greenlee, and I'm Secretary of the Chicago Transit Authority Transit Board, and we are ready to start the Strategic Planning and Service Delivery Committee meeting, chaired by our Director, Johnny Miller.
Thank you so much. Good morning. I'd like to call to order the August 29th meeting of the Committee on Strategic Planning and Service Delivery. Georgia, please call the roll.
Director Lee. Here. Director Ortiz. Here. Director Miller.
Here.
Director Miller, we do have a quorum, and I do believe that Director Ja will be here momentarily.
Thank you. Our first order of business is approval of the May 10th, 2023 committee minutes. May I have a motion to approve?
I'm out of voice today.
Say second.
Second.
It's been properly moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Ortiz. We will do a roll call vote. Director Lee?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Okay, the vote to approve the minutes passes.
Thank you. Our next order of business is a review of an ordinance authorizing the agreement of the University of Chicago, the operation of bus route 171, 172, and 192. Mike, you are ready.
Good morning. Mike Conley, your Chief Planning Officer. Staff are recommending approval of an agreement between CTA and the University of Chicago for service on 3 bus routes for a period of 5 years. This includes increases to the hourly rate as negotiated between the university and the city staff based on numbers from our finance department. The CTA revenue over the 5-year life of this contract will be $16 million. CTA and the university have had a contract since 2000 on this cooperative agreement to provide service in the greater Hyde Park, Kenwood, Woodlawn area. We would go to the next slide. This particular agreement covers 3 bus routes, the 171 and the 172, which provide local service for students and residents in the Hyde Park, Kenwood, Woodlawn, and University area down the south side. They operate year-round with a slightly wider headway in the summertime. The number 192 route, which is also funded under this agreement, operates between the University Hospitals complex and downtown Metra and CTA rail stations. This particular route serves both residents and commuters who are coming in on Metra. It is operated year-round on weekdays during both the AM and PM rush periods, serves the hospital employees as well as other residents who are commuting to and from the Hyde Park area. The staff recommend adoption of this, and I'll be glad to try to answer any questions for the board members.
Thank you, Mike, and I have no question.
Director Ortiz. Director Lee? Director Miller, there are no further questions.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the ordinance authorizing agreement, University of Chicago for bus route 171, 172, and 192.
Been moved. Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Ortiz. We will take the roll. Director Lee?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Lee? I'm sorry, Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Director Miller, the motion passes.
Thank you. Since there's no further business to conduct, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Ortiz. Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Lee?
Yes.
Motion to adjourn passes.
Thank you.
I believe we are now ready to move on to the meeting of the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee, which today will be chaired by our chairman, Lester Barclay, in the absence of our interim chair, Director Jakes.
Good morning. I would like to call to order the August 29th, 2023 meeting of the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Bridget, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Chairman Barclay, I will. Director Miller?
Here.
Director Ortiz? Here. Director Lee? Here. Chairman Miller, we do have a quorum, and Director Ja, as we know, is en route. We have 3 of the 4 members present.
Thank you. Our first order of business is the approval of the committee minutes of July 12th, 2023. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee, seconded by Director Miller. Let's take the roll. Director Lee,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Director Ortiz,
Yes.
Chairman Barclay.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Our next order of business is the finance report. Jeremy.
Morning, I'm Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer, and I'll present the June results as well as year-to-date numbers. On the first page, you see the June revenues. We're following a similar form of what we've seen for the first several months of the year, where fare box and pass totals are coming in positive. We have about $1.6 million of positive variance to budget for the month of June. A reduced fare subsidy continues to come in as expected, and non-fare box totals are coming in essentially at budget, but slightly down by about $100,000. Overall, for the month of June, we see total revenues positive to budget by about $1.5 million. On the next page, you see year-to-date numbers, and they're following a similar form as the monthly totals. Fare box and pass totals coming in positive by about $7.5 million. Reduced fare subsidy coming in as expected, and non-fare box totals coming in better than budget by over $4 million, $4.1 million on a year-to-date basis. So that leaves us on a year-to-date basis, total revenues positive to budget by about $11.6 million. It's also important to note that we're almost $25 million better than this time last year. On the next couple of pages, we go through our expenses. We see June expenses, labor continues to come in positive. This has decreased over the first several months of the year as we continue to ramp up hiring efforts. Materials are essentially coming in at budget, but slightly negative. Fuel and power continue to be very strong performers for us, with about $1.2 million of positive variance on fuel, about $600,000 of positive variance on power. Injuries and damages coming in as expected. And the purchase of security services coming in negative to budget by about $1.5 million due to the increased hiring efforts on security, as well as some timing of invoices on security contracts. Other expenses coming in almost $3 million to the positive, which leaves us for the month of June about $10.5 million better than budget. When you couple this with our revenues, we're about $12 million better than budget on the June expense and revenue side. On the next page, you see year-to-date expenses. And following a similar form, we see labor coming in positive by about $43 million. Materials essentially flat, but slightly down. Fuel and power, very strong performers throughout the year so far. Injuries and damages coming in at budget, and security services coming in negative by about $4 million. Other expenses positive over $11 million, which leaves us on a year-to-date basis with regard to our expenses, $57.7 million better than budget. When you factor in the revenue, positive favorability, that leaves us about $69.3 million to the positive on our system-generated revenues and expenses. On the next page, you see our public funding. For the month, we see sales tax for April coming in positive by about $1.6 million. The PTF is coming in about $1.4 million. And then the RET, the real estate transfer tax, is coming in negative by about $2.2 million. And again, not surprising, as interest rates have increased, that's cast a pretty long shadow over real estate sales, which you see here in the results. PTF on RET also is negative by about $700,000. But the good news is that the positive favorability on sales tax and PTF is offsetting the negative favorability on RET. So we're flat for the month to our budget overall. On the next page, you see year-to-date numbers. Again, positive favorability on sales tax and PTF are offsetting shortfalls on RET and PTF on RET. So we have about $200,000 of positive favorability year-to-date on our public funding. With regard to our federal relief funding draws, For the month, we're drawing down about $20.6 million. This means that we'll have drawn about 48.6% of the total allocation, which means that we have about $1.1 billion remaining. Again, as based on our current projections, this should carry us through 2025 into early 2026. But there's a lot of moving variables, and we'll be updating the paper with regard to new numbers as we go through the 2024 budget process. With regard to the three commodities that we purchased, fuel, power, and natural gas, we're where we need to be locked in for fuel through 2025. We've been making some selective purchases for 26. For power, we have an RFI out on the street for future purchases there that will then novate into an RFP. And then for natural gas, we're locked in for where we want to be through 2026. But again, this strategy has worked very well for us on selective opportunistic buys. And we've been able to lock in at very favorable rates across the spectrum on the commodities that we purchase. So that concludes my report for June and year-to-date numbers. Glad to answer any questions.
Director Lee? You have any questions?
No questions.
Director Miller? None. Chairman Barclay?
Mine is just a comment in terms of recovery relief funds. I appreciate the work that's gone into being very conservative in the use of those funds, and that there's a little bit left in reserve. And, I know a lot of effort has gone into, how to approach that. But I imagine certain agencies throughout the country probably have spent a lot of their money. And so I appreciate the fact that you guys have used a very conservative approach so that there's going to be a little bit left and a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Ortiz? Director Ja? Chairman Barclay, there are no further questions. We can proceed to agenda item number 4.
Next order of business is an ordinance amending ordinance 022141, approving the fiscal years 2023 through 2027 capital improvement program. Chairman Fine, Del Carr.
Good morning. I'm Michelle Curran, Deputy CFO and Comptroller. I'm here today to present a proposed amendment to the 2023 to 2027 Capital Improvement Program, or CIP. The board previously approved the amended $3.9 billion CIP, and we're now proposing an additional amendment based on known changes. First, the amendment would incorporate the $200 million FTA award for the rail vehicle replacement program to fund a portion of the cost to procure CTA's next generation of rail cars. Second, USDOT has awarded Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, or RAISE grant funding of $25 million for the 90th Street Terminal bus electrification. Third, federal fiscal year 23 provides congressionally directed awards for 4 projects totaling $8 million. These projects include $3 million to contribute to the design of all stations accessibility program improvements for the Oak Park and Ridgeland stations on the Green Line, $1 million to acquire bus security shields for bus operator protection, $2 million to contribute to the design for the Chicago Avenue bus garage modernization, and $2 million for a share of funding to complete a feasibility study that will evaluate options for reopening and renovating the Englewood Racine Green Line station. Fourth, FTA has awarded Areas of Persistent Poverty program funds of $778,000 to provide a share of funding for the Englewood Racine Green Line Station feasibility study. And fifth, RTA has allocated an additional $861,000 of 2022 Innovation, Coordination, and Enhancement, or ICE capital funds, which will be used for technology improvements on buses. And finally, $11.1 million of funds are reprogrammed to fund critical upgrades to the bus technology system and to add funding for the Western Brown Line Station rehabilitation project to include artwork. The net increase in funding due to this amendment is $245.8 million, bringing the 2023 to 2027 CIP to $4.16 billion. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Chairman Barclay?
No questions.
Director Ja?
No questions.
Director Ortiz? Director Miller? Director Lee?
No questions.
Chairman Barclay, there are no further questions. You can proceed to agenda item number 5. I'm sorry, there are no further questions.
May I now have leave to place this item on omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller. We will take the roll. Director Lee,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Chairman Barclay,
Yes.
Director Ortiz,
Yes.
Director Ja. Motion to place the item on the omnibus has passed. We may now move to agenda item number 5.
And number 5 is a review of an ordinance authorizing a license agreement with the city of Chicago through its Department of Public Health to install, operate, and maintain a public health vending machine at the 95th Street Dan Ryan Station, Red Line. Nora.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Nora Learson, Chief of Staff to the President. Staff recommends the approval of an ordinance authorizing a license agreement with the City of Chicago through its Department of Public Health to install a public health specialty vending machine at the 95th Red Line Station. The machine at the 95th Red Line Station is a part of CDPH's plan to pilot the use of vending machines to deliver free general hygiene, health, and harm reduction supplies to individuals experiencing substance use disorder, homelessness, or other social vulnerabilities in Chicago. CTA's 95th Street Station is one of 5 sites in the pilot program, which also includes libraries and community centers. The offerings will include naloxone, which can be used to reverse opioid overdose. Use of the public health vending machine will be open to everyone, and items are provided at no cost. Participants must take certain steps to access the items, including using a personal identification number provided through processes outlined by the Department of Public Health for certain items. CDPH staff will be on site in the initial weeks to answer questions and educate people about the machine. CDPH is responsible for the oversight, maintenance, and management of the vending machine and the pilot program. I'm happy to take any questions.
Chairman Barclay.
I think this is a positive effort with the city of Chicago, basically practical needs for people who are in need. And so I applaud the CTA for, working collaboratively with the city of Chicago's health department to make this happen.
Director Lee.
Just want to echo the same sentiments. I think this is a great program and looking forward to having it expand, hopefully.
Director Miller,
No question.
Director Ortiz,
Also agree with the comments.
Director Ja.
Yeah, totally agree. I think the only thing is, would love to understand how do you expand this and criteria for us to be able to expand it based on the results from the pilot, and if there are some data points around what is going to be the criteria of success. But incredible, right? If we can expand it.
Sure, yeah, the agreement allows for expansion, and we'll be working closely with the Department of Public Health as they monitor the pilot program. And they will also be posting publicly outcomes and data from the machines as well. So it's really an ongoing process of communicating and collaborating with them.
Thank you.
Chairman Barclay, there are no further questions.
May I now have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller. We will take the roll. Director Ja,
Yes.
Director Ortiz,
Yes.
Chairman Barclay,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Director Lee.
Yes.
The motion to place the item on the omnibus passes. We may now move on to agenda item number 6.
Our next order of business is an ordinance authorizing an amendment to a retail concession lease with Greyhound Lines for property located at 15 West 95th Street, Chicago, Illinois.
Yes, it
Red
is,
Line. Bill Mooney.
Morning, Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer. Staff recommends approval of an ordinance authorizing an amendment to a retail concessions lease with Greyhound Lines, Inc. for property located at 15 West 95th Street. 2018, CTA and Greyhound entered into a retail concession lease, allowing Greyhound to utilize a bus slip located at the CTA's 95th Street Red Line Station. The proposed amendment will permit Greyhound's affiliate, FlixBus, to utilize the bus slip. Current monthly rent is $1,339.36. The amendment will increase the monthly rent to $1,785.81, which will continue to be subject to 3% annual escalations. The amendment also requires Greyhound to provide a security deposit in the amount of $21,268.27. And FlixBucks to issue a certificate of insurance in accordance with the lease. All other terms of the lease will remain in effect, including the provisions which require Greyhound to indemnify the CTA and permit CTA to terminate the lease upon 60 days notice if the property is needed for our operation. I'll be happy to take any questions on this item.
Chairman Barclay,
No question.
Director Ja,
No question.
Director Ortiz, Director Miller,
No question.
Director Lee,
No questions.
Chairman Barclay, there are no further questions.
And now I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller. We will take the roll. Director Lee,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Chairman Barclay,
Yes.
Director Ortiz,
Yes.
Director Ja. Chairman Barclay, the motion has passed to place this item on the omnibus. We may now move on to agenda item number 7.
Next order of business is an ordinance authorizing a sublease between Sterling Racing LLC and development. Now for Chicago property located at 120 North Racine Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. Joe Mooney.
Real estate staff recommends approval of an ordinance authorizing a sublease between Sterling Racine LLC and Development Now for Chicago for property located at 120 North Racine. On August 12th, 2015, the Transit Board approved a 10-year lease with Sterling Racine, 84,879 square feet, on the first and second floors of the CTA-owned building at 120 North Racine. The lessee has requested CTA's consent to a sublease of approximately 44,976 square feet, space on the first and second floors of the building. Development Now for Chicago, an Illinois non-for-profit corporation. The sublease has a term of September 1st, 2023 to September 30th, 2024. The sublessee will have the right to permit the 2024 Democratic National Convention Committee, DNC Services Corp., and the 2024 Biden for President campaign to occupy the sublease premises during the term. Sterling Racine will continue to be responsible for all terms of the lease, including rent, its proportionate share of the building operating expenses, and all applicable taxes and utility fees. The lessee is required to obtain CPA's consent prior to subleasing any of the lease space, which cannot be unreasonably withheld. I'm happy to take any questions on this item.
Chairman Barclay,
No question.
Director Lee,
No questions.
Director Miller,
No question.
Director Ortiz, Director Ja. Chairman Barclay, there are no further questions.
But I now have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller to place this item on the omnibus. We will now take the roll. Director Ja,
Yes.
Director Ortiz, Chairman Barclay,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Director Lee.
Yes.
Chairman Barclay, the motion to place this item on the omnibus passes. We are now ready to move on to agenda item number 8.
Our next order of business is an ordinance authorizing an agreement with City Gear Inc. for volunteer service activities. Sam Smith.
Good morning. This is Sam Smith, your Vice President of Government and Community Relations. This is an ordinance for a new agreement with City Year. City Year was founded in 1988 as a national service program to unite young adults between 17 and 24 years old for a year of full-time community service. City Year has grown from 50 core members in Boston to more than 3,000 members serving in 29 U.S. cities, as well as in South Africa and the United Kingdom. Through this agreement, City Year will provide more than 8,000 hours of volunteer time each program year to support various CTA projects, including assisting CTA planning and field activities such as posting flyers, handing out brochures, and customer outreach. In exchange for volunteer time, CTA agrees to provide fair media up to 190 passes per program year. CTA's current agreement with City Year expired June 15th, 2023. Staff recommends approval of a new agreement for the 2023 to 2025 program years. If approved, this agreement will expire on June 15th, 2025. The financial impact is $200,000 per program year. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Chairman Barclay,
No questions.
Director Lee,
No questions.
Director Miller,
No question.
Director Ortiz,
None.
Director Ja.
Questions?
Chairman Barclay, there are no further questions.
And now have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller. We'll take the roll call vote. Director Lee,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Chairman Barclay,
Yes.
Director Ortiz,
Yes.
Director Ja. The motion passes. We are now ready to move on to agenda item number 9.
Our next order of business is an ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with Cook County for the sheriff to provide groundskeeping and maintenance work on authority property down on Bond.
Morning.
All right.
Here this morning to bring an ordinance in reference to the SWAP program to the board for final approval. This is a program that's been in place for several years now here at CTA. And the program pays for the guards. It also pays for the employee, not the employees, but the people that they bring to clean up properties. And they clean the properties around the system for us. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Chairman Barclay,
No questions.
Director Lee,
No questions.
Director Miller,
No question.
Director Ortiz, Director Ja.
No questions.
Chairman Barclay, there are no further questions.
May I now have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
Moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller. We'll take the roll call vote. Director Ja,
Yes.
Director Ortiz,
Yes.
Chairman Barclay,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Director Lee,
Yes.
Chairman Barclay, the motion to place this item on the omnibus passes. We are now ready to move on to agenda item number 10.
Our next order of business today is a review of contracts number B1 through B3 infrastructure.
Chairman, are there any questions? Director Ja,
No questions.
Director Ortiz, Chairman Barclay,
No question.
Director Miller,
No question.
Director Lee,
None.
Chairman Barclay. We may now proceed to contracts number C1 through C2.
Our next order of business today is a review of contracts number C1 through C2, contract awards for finance.
Chairman Barclay, do you have any questions?
No question.
Director Lee,
None.
Director Miller,
No question.
Director Ortiz, Director Ja.
Questions?
Chairman Barclay, we may now proceed to contract number F1.
Our next order of business today is a review of contract number F1, contract awards for administration.
Chairman Barclay, do you have any questions?
No question.
Director Ja,
No questions.
Director Ortiz?
None.
Director Miller,
No question.
Director Lee?
None.
Chairman Barclay, there are no further questions. We may now proceed to contract number G1 through G3.
Our next order of business today is a review of contract number G1 through G3, contract awards for technology.
Chairman Barclay, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Director Ja,
No questions.
Director Ortiz? No. Director Miller,
No question.
Director Lee?
None.
Chairman Barclay, there are no further questions.
Our next order of business is a review of contract number J1, contract award for law.
Chairman Barclay, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Director Lee?
None.
Director Miller?
No question.
Director Ortiz?
No.
Director Ja?
Questions?
Chairman Barclay, there are no further questions.
Since there are no further questions on the contract, may I have leave to place the 10 contracts on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller that the 10 contracts be placed on the omnibus for board approval. We will take the roll call vote. Director Ja?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Lee?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay, the motion to place the items on the omnibus passes. We may now proceed to item number 10B.
Since there's no further business to come before the committee, I have a motion to approve the omnibus and recommend the omnibus for board approval.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller that the omnibus be put before the board for board approval, be recommended for board approval. We will take the roll call vote. Director Lee?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Ortiz,
Yes.
Director Ja, Chairman Barclay, the motion passes.
And finally, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller that we adjourn the meeting of the Finance Audit and Budget Committee. We will take the roll call vote. Director Ja,
Yes.
Director Ortiz, Chairman Barclay,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Director Lee.
Yes.
This meeting is adjourned, Chairman Barclay.
Take a 10-minute break, please.
Good morning. My name is Georgette Greenlee. I'm the Secretary of the Chicago Transit Authority Board. And we are here today for the August 29th meeting of the Chicago Transit Authority Board of Directors. Chairman Barclay.
Good morning. I would like to call to order the meeting of the Chicago Transit Board for August 29th, 2023. Georgette, please call the roll.
Director Ja.
Yes.
Director Ortiz. Here. Director Miller.
Here.
Director Lee.
Here.
Chairman Barclay, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Our first order of business is public comment. Georgette.
Mr. Chairman, we have 7 public commentators this morning. Sativa Volbrecht, Joseph Mikulski, Fatima Aye, Brandon McFadden, Emily Chaklas, Bill Morton, and Trudy Leon have registered. 3 have not yet arrived. I will note that for the record. And Kyle Sussman has sent a public comment to be read into the record. To our public commenters, welcome. We are glad that you are here on today. I would like to remind each one of you that you have 3 minutes with which to present your public comment, and that you should not direct your comments to any person in particular who is here today or who is not here. And with that, I believe we will start with, is it Fatima?
I'm going to be sitting here.
Please.
Thank you, everybody, for letting me speak. I'm going to be speaking about safety and reliability of the CTA, and hopefully it'll help improve the experience for everybody. First, I'm going to be speaking about safety. I used to live in the Edgewater neighborhood, and I used to take the red line up from work and back from work. And one of my experiences was there was a man with a large knife on the platform, and he was waving it around in front of this lady. He ends up going into our car. We all leave our car to the next car. The train is stalled. Nothing happened. Nobody came. Police, the train conductor, nobody helped. And then he ended up leaving, and this was on the Wilson stop. And I know there are a lot of people that are probably on drugs or something. He probably wasn't in his right mind, but that was when I ended up moving to Printers Row, which is walking distance from work, because I couldn't take the CTA. I didn't want to be a statistic, because safety is very important to me. I've had other experiences of sexual harassment and screaming at me, etc. I don't see any security or personnel who would be able to help on the CTA or on the platforms. That was one of my major issues with the CTA and my own safety and just being comfortable taking the CTA if I were to go to work or anywhere else. So I generally now I've moved to the near west side, so I can easily bike to work.
You have 1 minute.
Okay. So for reliability, I would take the bus, the 20 bus off of Madison, and I've used the Ventra app. And it would tell me I have 2 or 3 minutes for the bus to arrive, but then it wouldn't arrive. So I would wait, and sometimes it would be 10 minutes, 15 minutes, even half an hour, and it wouldn't arrive. And then I end up being late to work or wherever I was going. So now I strictly just bike anywhere I go, just because I know that I'll be able to get to my destination at a good amount of time and not be late. So those are my 2 major points, and I hope they were clear and thank you so much.
Thank you. Brandon McFadden.
Good morning, members of the board and President Carter. My name is Brandon McFadden, an organizer with Commuters Take Action, a local collective of riders advocating for better transit. First, Commuters Take Action would like to thank and congratulate the frontline employees of the CTA who are more consistently running over 90% of scheduled system service. Of course, it is important to remember that this increase is largely due to the 18% reductions of scheduled service implemented between October 2022 and today. In June of last year, I started tracking the movement of all 8 rail lines throughout the system using both the CTA's developer API and other publicly available resources. By monitoring specific stations across the system, I can determine the number of arrivals as well as the intervals that they arrive at. This data is collected and analyzed like the CTA's new performance scorecard. Over the last year, the data set has amassed 500,000 arrivals and has allowed data analysts like myself opportunities that aren't available to the public. In the spirit of transparency, it would be nice to have the CTA expose the data sets used for the performance scorecard for others to leverage through the Power BI data marketplace. In the CTA's performance scorecard, gaps in service are indicated using arrival intervals or headways that are double or triple the schedule. While double and triple headways are down overall as a result of the schedule reductions, during a 15-minute interval schedule, this metric would not capture a 29-minute service gap, which is still significant. Commuters Take Action have started reviewing the consistency of arrivals, flagging intervals that are within 50% of the train ahead. For example, a 20-minute headway following a 15-minute headway would be considered consistent, where a 23-minute headway would not. While I don't have time to go into detail, our analysis has found that of the trains dispatched, between 60 and 70% of those trains have headways within these parameters. However, still having 30 to 40% of trains arriving inconsistently makes trip planning difficult or frustrating for riders, especially when those inconsistent arrivals are not paired with service alerts highlighting the reason for the gap.
Got 1 minute.
Of course, not all gaps are within the control of the CTA, as disruptions can occur due to outside factors like a PIU activation or unauthorized individuals entering the right of way. But when delays occur, more effort should be put into spacing trains out or short turning them to avoid trains traveling in packs to their terminus. To close, Commuters Take Action would like to extend an open invitation to both the board and the CTA to contribute and offer direct feedback as you continue to work through the challenges amplified by the pandemic. Likewise, feel free to reach out to us at any time with any transit-related topics. We'd love to be more engaged. After all, we share a common goal: a frequent, safe, and reliable transit system for all Chicagoans.
Yes. Emily Chaklis.
Good morning. My name is Emily Chaklis, and I've been a resident of Chicago and a CTA rider for the last 4 years. I'm here today because I'm deeply invested, but also really concerned with the health of our public transit system. Recently, I was waiting at a bus stop and 3 scheduled buses in a row did not show up. And this was in the middle of the day on a weekend. We waited an extra 45 minutes without shade in the sun before giving up and ending up having a friend pick us up. And unfortunately, that's not an isolated experience of getting ghosted by our public transit. The issues with service have become something that I expect each and every time I ride the train or bus. For example, today I almost missed the cutoff for speaking with you due to one of my trains being delayed. And I'd left my home with the Ventra app projecting I'd be 25 minutes early. The CTA station boards, the transit app, Google Maps app, and Ventra tracking often report different schedules, and that makes trip planning really frustrating and sometimes impossible. I honestly always feel like I'm taking a gamble on which app or schedule might be right because the schedules across platforms are not often unanimous. On top of that, trips with transfers that rely on multiple schedules aligning very perfectly often feel especially risky and don't accurately estimate time travel transparency to riders. Looking at performance metrics in reports for hiring that y'all have put out recently, I can see why there are so many issues. The hiring data for rail operators and flaggers looks staggeringly low in comparison to bus operator hiring. And I wonder just what's happening here. The class sizes in hiring for rail operators and flaggers does need to be prioritized and expanded to create meaningful improvement to service issues that riders are facing. Additionally, the CTA's responsibility for safety issues aren't.
You have 1 minute.
Okay, no worries. The CTA's response to safety issues aren't earning ridership back as fast as needed because the solutions offered are not centering rider experience. Safety doesn't mean raising the height of turnstiles, employing K-9 units, or stop and frisking people. Alternatively, a real safety concern is 100+ degree heat in your bus not showing up on time. How many people might have experienced that just last week and will again this week when we know temperatures will raise above 110? What creates safety is public transit that comes on time, frequent intervals, and riders knowing they can easily and quickly connect with someone like an unarmed conductor with de-escalation training that can help with anything that comes up on a ride, whether they or someone around them needs assistance. Please hear us. We are here to work with you. I'm not interested in any more service cuts, and I'm sure we agree there. I want to help stop the need for any more. That starts with earning riders time through. Thank you. Thank you.
Fatima Aya. I'm sorry, Sativa Bobrick.
Hello, my name is Sativa. I moved to Hyde Park about 7 years ago, and right now I live in Bronzeville in the Grand Boulevard area. I don't have a car or a bike, so I rely on the CTA to move around the city. I use the CTA almost every day for everything from work to appointments to like more leisurely activities. I typically take the green, blue, or red line trains. I very frequently take buses. Personally, I take a lot of pride in Chicago's public transportation system. I think that it's one of the best in the country and one of the best things about our city. However, one of my most vivid memories about the CTA is last winter when I missed my bus by a few minutes. And when I checked when the next bus would be coming, it said 25 minutes. So normally when that happens, I take ride shares so that I won't be late. But at that time, I had just barely gotten my new job and I couldn't afford to. So instead, I had to wait for the bus for half an hour in single-digit weather. While they think the CTA has made improvements at operating their reduced schedule, I think that more frequent buses would mean more reliability for users and stop situations like these from happening. In my opinion, around 10 minutes in between buses is ideal. More frequent schedules have been linked to more ridership in public transportation systems, and I think implementing that system would help boost CTA ridership back to pre-pandemic levels. Additionally, I'd like to talk about the lack of cleanliness and upkeep of Southside train stations and bus stops. In particular, the 47th Red Line station is frequently very dirty. I feel like Southside train stops and bus stops are often less maintained than downtown and Northside stops. They have more trash in the station as well as right outside the station. For example, the 47th Red Line stop often has trash at the bus stops that are right outside. Lack of maintenance at these stops make them seem less welcoming to users, and the lack of maintenance contributes to an already existing negative stigma about this. It discourages use of these train stations and bus stops, and ultimately, I believe that we deserve just as much cleanliness and attention as the rest of the city.
Thank you. Thank you. Rudy Leon.
Morning, President Carter and the CTA board. Thank you for having us. Please consider live streaming more CTA cameras as a deterrent to crime. Then the people who are wanting to do crime, they won't know if maybe at that time they're being watched by a great measure of our population, of our fellow riders, and also of maybe armchair video enthusiasts. We also appreciate meeting with Phil Mooney and Jeff Wilson on August 3rd this month, and we appreciate all the information, and we really appreciate all the work that you do. And I do want to follow up. I'm trying to contact the CTA Red Line Station parking lot where there is a severe cleanliness problem, and you said that the CTA is not responsible for that. That is a privately owned garage. But still, we'll see what we could do. But if you can, maybe in the future, CTA could have a little part in asking in that contract to that garage needs to be maintained per CTA operating guidelines. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bill Morton.
I'm Bill Morton. I'm president of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. We represent our businesses, residents, community organizations, and nonprofit organizations in our community. Like my colleague Trudy Leon stated, on August 3rd, we did meet with Bill Mooney and Jeff Wilson at the Red Purple Line modernization. The issue that we have in Rogers Park, the issue of our constituents, is ADA accessibility on the Jarvis Red Line and the Morse Red Line. We met with Bill and Jeff about this, and they really informed us very well as to what the process is, what the phases are, how funding is accessed, and how long the timetable could possibly be. They didn't give us an ETA. I understand that there are other issues, and there are so many different stations in the city of Chicago, but we have people in the Rogers Park community, seniors, people with disabilities, families with strollers, people coming from Jewel on Howard Station with a whole bunch of groceries. Actually not the Jewel, the Morse Market, because it's Morse Station, not Howard. But we have a lot of people who cannot access your services. You're missing a customer base. But more importantly than that is that our residents cannot use your services. And we need to be ADA accessible by law. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to read into the record the public comment from Kyle Sussman. Hello, I would like to submit the following public comment for the August 29th board meeting. I was just in New York City, a city that any true Chicagoan would like to think we hold our own against. However, we are shockingly dissimilar on one count: train and bus service levels. I took the train probably 15 or so times in my trip, and only twice needed to wait more than 8 minutes for the train, with the norm being a wait of 2 to 4 minutes. I understand how the MTA has more revenue to support such a service level. But it is also true that CTA is losing more loyal passengers every day because of the poor service levels and the need to wait more than 8 minutes for a train or bus. We need to devise a long-term strategic vision around trying to induce ridership back to the CTA by increasing service levels to a point where a train is quicker than most car trips. Then we will see an increase in ridership and therefore revenue, and be able to rightfully claim to our New York City friends that Chicago is no second city when it comes to public transit. Best, Kyle Sussman. Chairman Barclay, that ends the registered public comments for today. I believe that we do have someone who has arrived today and requested to speak. We have at this point had 7 public comments.
At this point, we've reached our limit and we have a full agenda today, so we need to move on. Unless they were registered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you to all the public commentators. We appreciate, we hear you. And I'm going to ask President Carter, I'm sure he and his staff members have been taking notes about some of the comments that you've made today. We value your input. And as citizens of the city of Chicago and surrounding suburbs, we appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts and your thoughts. So I'm going to ask President Carter to basically hone in on some of these and try and connect with some of you for further dialogue. Thank you very much for some. At this point, our next item of business on the agenda is the President's report given by our President Dorval Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I begin, we heard a lot of comments today from our customers with regards to the challenges that we're all facing in terms of service that we're providing and the quality of that service that they are experiencing. And I want to make the point that we share the concerns that you have about the quality of our service, and we are certainly working diligently to improve it. There's going to be a presentation that's going to happen later in this board meeting from CMAP, the MPO organization, that are going to be presenting to our board their proposed recommendations for CMAP around the funding issues that are certainly significant to the overall ability of CTA to improve its service and to really put it in a position to compete as a world-class transit system within our country and around the globe. I hope that you will listen, if you're still here, that you will listen to that presentation. You will hear a number of the recommendations they're making, because there's going to come a point in time over the course of the next year where your voices, along with the voices of our other customers and stakeholders, are going to be critical to the conversation down in Springfield as we really try to lock in the level of funding that will allow us to address many of the complaints and concerns that you're raising. I welcome the opportunity to work in tandem with my customers as we pursue the mutual goals of improving our transit system and putting us in a position where you're receiving the quality of transportation services that we all want to deliver here. We certainly, in spite of those issues, will continue to work every day to improve on what we're doing right now. I recognize that not everyone has a positive experience riding CTA on a regular basis. We will continue to work to improve that. And that's one of the things that I've been working on with our meeting the moment plan, which I'm about to talk about during my remarks. But I did feel it was important for me just to take this moment to basically let you hear from me directly that I am not insensitive to or unable to appreciate what you're raising with us. It has been the focus of my entire team for the past year, and it will continue to be our focus moving forward. But we need help. And we're looking to get help from those who can help us do that. And I think you all can play a critical role in that conversation, just like you're playing a critical role in providing feedback to both my staff as well as to the board at meetings like we're having today. So thank you as well for your input and your comments today. With that, let me move on to my remarks for the day. As I indicated just now, we just recently reached a milestone of our Meeting the Moment action plan. And I'd like to take a moment to at least highlight some of the progress and improvements that we've made since we started working on this plan. We attempt to really start to restore our service and improve the overall CTA customer experience. On August 11, 2023, we marked the 1-year anniversary of the unveiling of our plan. And I think it's important to briefly acknowledge the execution of that effort, the successes that we've achieved, as well as the challenges that still lay ahead, some of which you obviously have heard from some of our commenters today. As you are aware, providing quality public transit service in a post-pandemic America has been a national issue facing public transit agencies around the country, especially large and legacy systems like CTA. In response, we have all worked diligently to improve our service and the programs during this most difficult public health challenge of our lifetimes. Even as many industries return to normal over the past 2 years, we continue to experience what one journalist recently referred to as the transit version of long COVID. And I think that's a very apt description. I constantly acknowledge that we still face challenges whenever I discuss the current state of our services. And I am also very excited about our successes, which we have realized in large part because of the planning, execution, and hard work of my staff. This includes every one of our nearly 10,000 employees at every level within our organization, from our dedicated, hardworking frontline employees to the senior leadership with whom I work to execute our day-to-day strategies, as well as every other person who has worked in support of our mission and our customers during this very difficult time. I'd like to take a moment to provide just a few highlights of our efforts. As you're aware, we have been heavily focused on attracting new hires and retaining great employees, which is the biggest factor in improving our service. To address those needs, we've created the most aggressive and comprehensive recruitment and hiring program that this agency has ever had, and implemented new and attractive hiring and retention bonuses and incentives. Since August of 2022, we have held over 10 one-stop shopping job fairs and have had over 2,800 attendees. As a result, Year to date, the CTA has already hired more employees in 2023 than in any previous recent year, including 600 newly hired bus operators, which is as many bus operators as we have historically hired in a 12-month period. We have also hired 85 bus operators this year, and today, most of our bus mechanics vacancies have been filled. I'm sorry, I meant to say 85 bus mechanics, not bus operators. We've optimized our service schedules to match our current workforce levels and kept an eye on key performance areas, which, along with our new hires, have combined to produce the very encouraging service delivery improvements and trends we've been seeing for months on our bus and rail sides. I wish to point out, that doesn't mean that every day, every trip, and every run goes exactly as we planned. You certainly have heard today, and I don't discount or take issue with the comments and the experiences that the customers that you heard from today talked about. I think it's important to keep in mind the volume of service that we provide on a day-to-day basis, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And within that service, there are going to be issues and challenges. My goal when I put the Meeting the Moment plan into place was to mitigate that as best as we could, especially given the workforce challenges that we were facing. And I believe if you look at the holistic view of everything that we've done, we've accomplished some of that. But with a very clear understanding, and I want to be clear about this, we still have a lot more to do. I still need to bring my service levels back up to where they were pre-pandemic. That would certainly speak to the frequency issues that you were hearing some of our customers talk about. Our more frequent service will come when I can add additional service into our system. And we have mentioned to you, even in our previous customer surveys, the frequency of service is one of the key drivers to customers using CTA more and increasing our ridership over the long term. Certainly, I'm encouraged by the hiring numbers that I talked about to know that in the future, we are going to start increasing our service, and you're going to start seeing some of that occur with the budget that I'll be announcing for the upcoming year. It is certainly the goal of us to get to that point. We're going to continue to hire at a rate that will allow us to get to that point. And as those numbers continue to increase, we will start putting service back in that I had to optimize in order to basically meet the reliability expectations that I was trying to meet for the majority of our customers. We also continue to post our expanded interactive monthly scorecard online, which highlights and advises our stakeholders about our progress and success, and also informs the public about challenges we are facing and that we are working to overcome. One of the things that I mentioned to the board when I produced and showed you the interactive scorecard is that I do not view it as a stagnant document. It is an iterative document that we will continue to improve and add to over time. And so when we hear feedback from some of our customers about the type of data and information they would like to see, that is certainly additional information that we can take a look at and determine the best way to start to incorporate that into the data that we produce. The goal here is to be as transparent as possible while providing the customers with real information that's easy to digest and to understand about the service that we're providing and how it's impacting our customers on a day-to-day basis. That is our ongoing goal and goal that we'll continue to meet as we continue to improve our monthly reporting data on a regular basis. Along with the hiring bonuses and retention incentives I mentioned a moment ago, we've also made other investments with our employees in mind, like upgrades to employee facilities and enhanced benefits. We've also increased the number of employee recognition programs and employee appreciation that we've hosted in an effort to continue to improve the retention rates among the existing employees that we have, which is part of our ability to increase our overall workforce numbers as we go forward. We've also redesigned our bus tracker website and made it more mobile responsive, which is a key achievement as part of our strategy to upgrade our digital tools. We've also introduced a redesigned bus tracker on our website, implemented a new interactive performance metrics dashboard, and we'll soon introduce our new chatbot, which will provide automated assistance and information to our customers, allowing more customer real-time feedback to CTA about service and other issues that they may be experiencing on our system. This year, we've improved the customer experience at our facilities in several ways, including upgrades and repairs to 29 rail stations. We've expanded our cleaning regimen to include more power washing. I've hired 50 new employees to work as part of our janitorial staff and I've entered into a $2 million contract with Social Services Agency Threshold and the Haymarket Group to address issues related to unhoused individuals on our system. We have also continued to work closely with our law enforcement partner, the Chicago Police Department, to explore additional strategies that have successfully improved safety and security on our system. And in fact, crime is down 9% since January of this year. Throughout the past year, we have executed our plan. We've expanded it by adding new initiatives or adjusting our initial plan as necessary, always attempting to react nimbly and carefully to a post-pandemic realities the CTA has never faced before. Everything we've done has first considered measures that would best serve our customer in the short term. But every day since unveiling our plan, we continue to look towards the weeks and months that were to come, remembering that we were moving through uncharted waters, something that we continue to do even as I speak. I also want to thank the customers that have returned to transit. Our ridership has grown consistently throughout 2023, and we are now providing more than 900,000 rides system-wide on an average weekday. In fact, in August 3rd, the first day of Lollapalooza, we nearly hit 1 million rides, missing that milestone by only 143 rides on that particular day. We have known for a very long time that our ridership will return slowly. That has not stopped us from making every effort to reach out to them via social media and networking, an internal campaign, and otherwise lobbying potential customers to ride our buses and trains to work, to school, and for recreation. I am very encouraged for the future, and I'm very proud of the work we've all done to make these improvements possible. I want to thank this board for your support over the past year and pledge that CTA staff will continue to earn that support in the weeks and months to come. As I indicated before, we still have a lot of work to do, but things are better today than they were a year ago. We have also taken another very positive step towards a better CTA for our customers and employees recently that I wanted to share with you. As you know, transit equity is very important to me, and it's a priority for CTA. Throughout my career in public transit, and especially during the time as CTA president, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and accessibility have continued to inform every policymaking decision that I've made. The work, study, and professional development necessary to create more equitable workplaces continues to evolve. Expanding curricula and resources, along with new workplace applications, help businesses resolve and identify old inequities while improving the corporate culture to better serve their customers and employees. I believe that advancing racial equity at CTA requires a full-time, experienced professional that will focus on operationalizing equity internally and externally and coordinating those efforts across the CTA. And that is why we have brought on board Denise Barreto, who is our new Chief Equity and Engagement Officer. And Denise is here with us today. Denise, would you stand? Denise comes to us from Cook County government, where she served as their inaugural Director of Equity and Inclusion, where she led the development of key racial equity programs and policies. Denise has a wealth of experience working on equity issues, and we are very excited to have her join the CTA family. She will bring fresh ideas to CTA, advancing the work that we are currently doing and bringing to bear her wealth of experience and talent to expand on it as well. I have also asked Denise to work with elected officials and the communities that we serve as part of her overall portfolio. She shares my vision and commitment to serving our stakeholders and will keep developing new strategies for better outreach through our government community relations department. I'm excited for her to begin this important work that she's going to be doing on behalf of CTA. And I look forward to all of you getting to know her better as she continues to establish herself within CTA for the work that I believe is very important to be institutionalized as an agency as we move forward. One of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about is the effort that we're engaged in around capital project outreach. CTA is currently engaged in several transformational capital projects across our system, including the Red and Purple Modernization Project, the Red Line Extension, the multi-phase Forest Park Branch rebuild, the All Stations Accessibility Program, and the Western Brown Line Station rehabilitation. These investments are not only great opportunities for our prime contractors and small and disadvantaged business enterprise communities, but they are also great opportunities for individuals who are looking for jobs. To help connect job seekers looking for careers in construction with CJ Job Opportunities, on August 8th, CJ hosted an outreach event that allowed those individuals to engage with workforce agencies, contractors, and union representatives, including the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership, Hire 360, the Operating Engineers Union, and 2 electrician union locals. We will continue to provide these types of opportunities for those looking to work with CTA, whether they are just starting out in their career, hoping to switch things up professionally, or eyeing opportunities in transit-related construction. This is yet another way in which we seek to be a good neighbor to the communities that we serve. Finally, I would like to close with something that I've discussed with the board, but not as often publicly as I probably would like to. As you know, last October, I was elected chair of the American Public Transportation Association, or APTA, which represents more than 1,500 public and private sector member organizations. My election was a tremendous honor that allowed me to join the ranks of a very small group of experienced and thoughtful public transit officials who brought with them their own vision for how best to move our industry forward. This group includes a host of acknowledged public transportation luminaries, one of which is Nuria Fernandez, who is currently the administrator of the Federal Transit Administration, a person who once worked here at CTA. I have served in leadership roles with APTA since my appointment as president of CTA in 2015, and I've been an active and enthusiastic APTA member and supporter since the beginning of my career. Before being elected chair, I served as a member of the board of directors and executive committee, and as chair of the legislative and legislative steering committee. And prior to that, I chaired the research, communications, and advocacy committee, which oversees the largest portion of APTA's budget for the implementation of this research and overall advocacy strategy. These positions gave me invaluable insight into the considerations APTA makes every day in terms of how to engage, expand, and fund its efforts to study and grow public transit. As chair, I've advocated for increased public transit investments in every community across the country, including Chicago. I've also guided our industry as we plot the future of American public transit. That is an especially serious endeavor in a post-pandemic America, as so many transit agencies, including our own, are seeking to find their way forward. Supporting public transit agencies has been an especially meaningful and particularly challenging responsibility during this historic, critical time. My presence at APTA has helped to produce real and tangible financial benefits for CTA. I'd like to walk through a few of those for you. I was at the table as APTA's legislative chair when we worked with Congress to produce billions in emergency COVID federal relief funding for the public transit industry, including $2.2 billion that went to CTA. During that same time, I was also involved in implementing the industry's funding strategy when the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was passed. We were able to create a new program within that bill with the intended purpose of replacing old rail cars, an issue that is specifically of concern to CTA. CTA applied for funding under that program, and I am proud to say that we received $200 million to replace CTA's oldest rail cars, which is to date the single largest award from that particular program. I've also utilized my time as an APTA leader to work with Senator Tammy Duckworth for the adoption of our All Stations Accessibility Program at the federal level, which has helped put CTA in the front line for over $118 million in federal ASAP funds, which we received last December, which is allowing me to move much more faster towards my goal of a fully accessible rail system sooner rather than later. My role as an APTA leader has also allowed me to successfully advocate with federal lawmakers for a more robust federal formula program. This included a funding increase of more than 30% that all transit agencies now enjoy. And for CTA, that has meant an increase of almost $500 million over a 5-year period. I think it's important for you to understand that no matter where I am or what I am doing, I am always thinking about the city of Chicago, CTA, and its customers, planning for our future and gathering new ideas to benefit my agency, its employees, and the people we serve. As a result, my time as active chair has provided another extraordinary benefit to me as CTA president, which is what I wanted to speak to you about today. I am very excited about all that I have learned and seen over the past 10 months, and I have no doubt that this experience will yield tremendous results for this agency in the months and years to come, well after my tenure as chair has ended. Every active chair is asked to represent our industry and speak on its behalf at national and international gatherings. As a result, since last October, I have participated in APTA organized conferences, meetings, and events across the country. I've been excited by the fact that this experience has provided me with a platform to help expand the national conversation around transit equity, amplify the need for increased transit funding at the federal and local levels, and to highlight other vital issues that are front of mind for transit CEOs, board members, and businesses that serve and work with the public transportation agencies. Beyond our country's borders, I've also had the opportunity to lead delegations for study missions to Spain and Australia, and to address the UIC World High-Speed Rail Congress in Marrakesh, Morocco, representing the United States public transit industry. I should note that my participation in these activities came at no expense to our agency. My time abroad was funded by APTA and not CTA. Still, this agency and its customers will reap the benefits of those experiences. During these trips, I've been joined by transit professionals, private sector executives, and federal officials as we've learned about the best practices, unique programs, and new cutting-edge technologies that our sister public transit agencies overseas have adopted. The study mission in New Zealand and Australia earlier this month, for instance, took our delegation to Auckland, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Sydney. In every city we toured, the public transit systems, we saw construction sites for major capital projects, and heard background on their agency's history and how these multi-million-dollar investments will ultimately serve their customers and top transit officials as well, who at that time discussed how these agencies are handling basically the same kind of issues that we are being confronted with here in the United States. Initiatives that they are using to address their challenges like fleet decarbonization, rebuilding ridership, and enhancing the customer experience. In Melbourne, I provided a keynote address for 300 of Australia's public transit thought leaders at a conference hosted by the Public Transport Association of Australia and New Zealand. During my presentation, I had the opportunity to discuss the successes and challenges that lay before America's public transit industry. I also used that opportunity to shine a light on CTA and the hard work that we are doing to improve our service, increase our workforce, and address other challenges facing our agency in a post-pandemic Chicago. I can tell you that my address was well received and was attended by many officials in the Australian public transit, including the Victorian Minister for Public Transport and the head of transport for Brisbane. Perhaps the most important thing to come out of my Australia and New Zealand experience was the information that our sister agencies shared with us. They generously discussed the hard-won lessons learned from the pandemic, their view of innovative technologies within our industry, and the new ways that they seek to approach challenges that most public transit agencies are experiencing. For example, we had the opportunity to visit Sydney, Australia's Rail Operations Control Center. As you are aware, we are going through the process of building a new control center right now. So I was obviously very interested in hearing about their facilities and their system. I learned that Sydney's control center integrates operations, management, communications, planning, and representatives from other departments into a single building. This allows for a holistic agency-wide approach to managing incidents in a quick and effective manner. And I was very impressed with both the thoughtfulness and the execution of their system. I've already tasked my senior leaders with discussing the benefits and operational advantages of their approach. While Sydney's system isn't completely unique, Sydney was unquestionably an example of what an industry-leading integrated control center should look like and how it should operate. I believe that further discussions with their transit professionals may allow us to glean ideas that will improve upon our plans to build our own control center here at CTA. And this is but one example of Australia's approach to managing their transit system that we can obviously learn from and bring back to incorporate into transit agencies here in the US. I also found myself impressed with, maybe even the slightest bit envious of, their approach and their significant commitments to funding public transit, as well as the public policy statements that they make about the importance of mobility to their country and to their economic vitality. Coincidentally, Transportation for America, an advocacy organization made up of local, regional, and state leaders, recently published an article in its T4 America blog that compared support for public transit in the US versus Australia. While this article was published a week after I returned from the APTA study mission, both its publication and conclusions that it drew make clear why these types of study missions are important and also reflected my experience while I was there. And I'd like to share a quote with you. The blog shared the lessons learned while composing the article, and it read, "Even the best US states have a long ways to go in comparison to their international peers. This point became clear in our conversation with Australian experts while doing this research. It's easy to dismiss international transit comparisons as apples to oranges, but that excuse crumbles when the comparison is being made to a true peer like Australia. Both countries are large, developed, constitutional republics with low national population densities and strong subnational governments. While Australia's transit system is far from perfect, the United States could learn a lot from our friends across the Pacific." And that, directors, is exactly what I was doing. I have many ideas that have come from my travel experiences after chair, and I will be bringing them forward as best practices for CTA. And they make practical and financial sense to us. My point, however, is that these new experiences have challenged me to think differently about some of the issues that we face and some of the new avenues that we will investigate moving forward. I want to add that as I fulfilled my term as APTA chair and the commitments it required of me personally, I've never disconnected from my staff, our mission, or my dedication to this great agency. Throughout my term as chair, I've worked tirelessly to successfully implement and advance our post-pandemic action plan, and we are now seeing those results. In closing, I am very proud of my time as APTA chair, which will end this October. But I have been excited to serve our great industry, and I'm equally excited to bring these new ideas back home here in Chicago. There are many ways that we can continue to improve our agency as we move forward. Being open to and receiving new ideas across the globe, I think, is the critical step to doing what I've committed to doing to this board, which is turning the CTA into a world-class transit system. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, President Card, for your report. First, I want to thank you for sharing some of your experiences as chairperson of APTA. That broadens the scope for all of us, and we benefit as an agency and as a city from your experiences on a world-class stage. Thank you for sharing some of that insight. We're certainly looking forward to you applying some of what you've learned from your experiences this past year. I also want to thank you and your staff for allowing me to participate in a recent meeting of the roundtable, where we were able to discuss with the press some of the improvements that we're making in the Meeting the Moment program, which is celebrating its first year. And we're very thankful for the insight and for the transparency, because we heard some of the comments today earlier about some of the metrics that are used and how we can improve on those things. But all of that is geared towards improving the customer experience. And, you know, it's very good, because a year ago we were just introducing this, but your staff did a wonderful job over the course of the past year, sort of, you know, bearing everything to the public and saying, hey, these are the areas where we're improving, but these are the areas that we can even do better. And to some degree, these are areas that we have failed. So that kind of transparency, I think, is very, very important to the agency and the overall experience that our customers have here in Chicago. I also want to welcome Ms. Barreto as she takes her new role, and I'm very pleased to see you. And I've shared that April Morgan, Chief of Staff of the board, is going to set up a meeting so we can have a better conversation and get to know each other as we work together on equity and inclusion in those areas. You know, one thing I heard from one of the public comments was that, you know, sometimes the stations up north are different than the stations on the south side. And I see that myself when I drive by and I see the trash, and I have those same concerns about how things are developed on the north side at our stations versus on the south side. And there is an issue that needs to be addressed regarding that. So I just want to thank you for an opportunity for sharing this morning. You know, I enjoy my experience as chairman. You know, I attended the Bud Billiken parade on behalf of the CTA to see the workers, the employees there that are part of the community, that are well respected, and the citizens who appreciate the work, the hard work that the 10,000 employees that CTA does. They've had a lot of positive feedback for CTA, including bring back the Super Sunday transfer. That we heard. We heard that. But thank you for your report, and I'd like to open it up to anyone else for any comments from the board.
Director Ja.
Thank you for sharing. Would love to hear what are some of the 3 things that you are coming back and re-looking at based on your travel experience. Love to hear what those areas are.
I think the first area is funding. And you're going to hear from CMAP in a few minutes. CMAP was the beneficiary of my vision on funding, and a meeting they held with me literally after I returned from one of my trips. And I'm happy to say that part of what they have developed in their presentation is a reflection of the conversation about what it's going to really take to have a world-class transit in this region. And when I say region, I'm not just talking about CTA, I'm talking about Metro and PACE. When you go and see a world-class transit system, you begin to understand and appreciate what we could have here. And the way I have tended to describe CTA's, you know, not CTA's, but the region's transportation system, it's like when you go to buy a house and the house needs a little work. It needs to be rebuilt, it needs some rehab, so on and so forth. But you have this saying in the house, you know, in the housing industry, that the house has good bones. You can see the potential there. That's what our regional transportation system looks like right now. It is structurally a solid system. It has the geographic coverage, the connectivity, the ability to expand in ways that can allow us to do so much more in this region. But it's lacking is the funding to make that happen. And if we invest in this transportation system the way other countries are investing in their transportation system, you will see similar results in terms of the improvement to service and the quality of service that's being provided, not only by CTA, but by Metro, by PACE, to all of our customers, our able-bodied and disabled customers, as well as everyone else that needs mobility to get around the system. The other thing that I took away was just the way in which they approach public transportation as a policy matter. Mobility in many of these countries is viewed on the same level as housing, healthcare, education. These are fundamental governmental functions for which there is a fundamental belief that it needs to be properly addressed and supported. It isn't viewed as a stepchild to other policy initiatives, but it is right up there with the rest of them. And I think that's something that we really need to work at in our country to understand, because mobility is so foundational to so much else that one can accomplish in life. You certainly heard from some of our customers today about how important CTA is to their ability to get to their jobs, be able to live where they want to live in our community, and other things that make our city so viable and so, you know, invigorating as a community. We have an obligation to figure out a way to make it better. And we need the support to make that happen. We need the policies that drive the ridership and the revenues to support what we're trying to do. We need the ultimate financial basis to do all that. The third thing that I took away was just some of the operational efficiencies and effectiveness that they're implementing in their systems. And I gave you one example of that around the control center, but I saw many different examples of that. If you look at a city like Brisbane in Australia, they have the biggest bus network of any system in the entire world. They have found a way to create a bus system. And get this, I'm going to look to our customers here because they would appreciate this. They run buses on 3-minute headways. Buses. Think about that. And I sat there in amazement as I listened to them telling that. But you know what? You know why they're able to do that? Because they've invested in dedicated busways that allow those buses to move quickly and efficiently throughout their system. These are things that we should be talking about. These are things that I know my customers want. These are things that can ultimately improve this city, this region, this state. And I'm hopeful that as we go down to Springfield next year, this will be a part of the conversation that we're going to have. And I don't mean to steal all the thunder of my CMAP colleagues who are coming up here in a few minutes to talk to you, but they've heard me talk about all of this. We have a unique opportunity here in Illinois right now to really reimagine what we want the future of public transportation to be in the area of this state that is always viewed as the economic engine for everything else that we do. And I'm prepared to bring all of these ideas that I have learned over the course of this year, all of the information that I can bring to bear, all the advocacy that I understand as having served at a national level for this type of a conversation, to bear on the conversation in Illinois, to hopefully put us in a position where the future conversation about public transportation in this city is as bright as the potential for improvement economically for the city. And if we do this the right way, we're going to be in a position to really do things that no one ever imagined we would be able to accomplish in a city like Chicago.
Thank you.
And I could talk for another hour on that, but you guys want me to do that.
Director Ortiz. Thank you for sharing.
Director Miller.
I want to just say ditto to what our chairman has said, and thank our president, and also for not only addressing us, but addressing those who brought comments today. And hopefully our chat box is going to help with some of the frustration. Speaker number 3 talked about the difference in the app scheduling and all of that. So I hope our chat box and thing that we're doing, but a year later, we are making some improvement, and we hope it's going to help. Thanks.
Director Lee.
Just want to say thank you for your comments and just looking forward to, this is a real inflection point we're at, and I'm encouraged by what we're hearing, and thank you again for the public comments, but we're looking forward to a bright future, so I'm excited.
Thank you again, President Carter. Our next order of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of July 12, 2023. May I have a motion to approve?
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller. We'll take a roll call vote. Director John.
Yes.
Director Ortiz. Yes. Chairman Barclay.
Yes.
Director Miller.
Yes.
Director Lee.
Yes.
Chairman Barclay, the motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of July 12, 2023 has passed.
Thank you. Our next order of business is a presentation from the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having us today. I'm Erin Alleman, Executive Director of the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. With me is
Laura Wilkeson, Senior Director and Policy Advisor at CMAP.
Laura's really been leading the day-to-day of this work, but just to start maybe in brief, CMAP is the regional planning agency for Northeastern Illinois. We cover 7 counties, 284 municipalities, nearly 8.5 million residents call the Chicago region home. And we were directed by the General Assembly about a year ago to really look at the future funding fiscal cliffs that all of our transit agencies are facing here, and put together some draft recommendations to the General Assembly, to the governor's office, on how we might address these challenges, but also think about it as an opportunity. As you heard President Carter say, that it is a moment in time where we can be visionary, where we need to be thinking about how crucial transit is to our region and coming up with some bold solutions here. So we are calling this our plan of action for regional transit or PART program. Again, just thank you for advancing the slides. I promise I will say next. Just as a foundation, I touched on this, but really what the General Assembly asked us to do was just this. We need to look at the long-term financial viability of the system. We need to be thinking about the coordination of our system. It's not just CTA, but it's Metra and PACE. And the combination of those three agencies really interconnects our region in a meaningful way. But you heard safety, security, cleanliness, efficiency, they're concerns that the public have. And as we think about our customers, right, putting them front and center in this conversation is really important. We were also asked to really think about how racial equity, climate change, and how transit can help support the growth of our regional economy. And then also build this work on RTA, the Regional Transportation Authority's strategic planning efforts. That we would look at the recovery ratio, how we pay for transit operations, how we fund transit, whether it's through sales taxes, the formulas and distributions, how our governance structures work today and how we might reimagine them to work in the future. And then essentially anything else we discovered along the way that we should be recommending to the General Assembly. Next, please. I've been starting these conversations with really just the people. The people who ride transit are our top priority. It facilitates, our transit system facilitates people not only getting to visit friends, but it facilitates them being able to get to educational opportunities, to be able to get to healthcare opportunities, to get to jobs. And that's really the crux of our transit system. It's the people. Next slide. And we have talked a lot about how important transit is to our overarching regional economy here. And over this past couple of years, we've been working to bring our county partners and the city together to think about an economic partnership that we think, move, and act as one region. And this transit conversation too permeates the economic development world as it does folks who are working in many other issue areas. Next slide. In addition, I think many of you are aware that big businesses care about transit. It's one of the reasons why Google chose the Thompson Center as a location. It connects them and it provides their employees with a highly competitive workspace and access like none other by being able to be right co-located with our regional transit system here at the Thompson Center. Next slide. And thinking too about how our modes work together, right? It's not just the transit system, but it really can complement the roads that we have, and recognizing that when we have construction, our transit operators can expand and contract that system to help meet the needs of people getting to and from work. And we would be remiss if we didn't have a transit system that had the capacity and capability to be able to be responsive in the moment when things become under construction. Next slide. Again, this nexus between transit and climate as we look to the future and we really want to achieve our goals of meeting the greenhouse gas emissions reductions by our 2050 plan goals. Here's that we're only reducing our greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector by 1% per year. Before we pat ourselves on the back for that small reduction, we need to be reducing our transportation emissions by over 5% per year in order to really achieve that net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040 here. And so the opportunity again for our transit system to be able to be a bold part of that solution is top of mind for all of us as we've been approaching this work. Next slide. And then again, the things of the city of Chicago and complement with CTA that are really setting us up for success here. The Connected Communities Ordinance that was passed in July of 2022 really contemplates that nexus between the way we use our land and how transit plays into it. If you're not thinking about those opportunities and those places where you can have walkability and access to transit at the same time, we're missing an opportunity. But I also just want to compliment Chicago and CTA as a partner here for being future focused and thinking about how we might better utilize our land around our transit stations as assets. Next slide. All right, so to get into this work, we've been since January convening stakeholders from across the region. The legislation mandated that we bring business, civic, labor, environmental organizations and academia to the table, but then also that the CMAP board, which is made up of regional representatives from across the 7 counties here, and the MPO Policy Committee, which is our transportation agency stakeholders, contemplate this work as well. So we have been thinking about this work in 3 different ways. First, what is the system that we want? What's that future state that you heard President Carter say? And how do we make sure that we aren't going back just to 2019? Because I think, as you've heard from riders here today, riders probably across the board, the system that we had in 2019 wasn't meeting all of our needs. And so as we contemplate that future state, what are the things that we want? And then we started to talk about how we pay for it and governance. So that's how my next few slides will go here. But we've heard from riders that we need to rebuild public confidence and ensure that travelers can seamlessly and affordably access regional opportunities. And we think in order to be able to do that, we need to invest differently in our bus network systems, really making sure that our roadway agencies are partners in this process. Buses have been nimble and flexible throughout the pandemic and able to be more responsive than our rail. We need to be thinking about accessibility across the system and moving towards a state of fully accessible. I know that CTA's ASAP program has had a huge influence on the way that Congress has been thinking about funding transit moving forward, but that should be a floor and not a ceiling here, that we should be making sure that our system is publicly accessible in all places and shapes. But there are ways for us to think about being responsive to new changing travel patterns. Again, as we've seen ridership change, Mondays are pretty quiet, Fridays are a little quiet, right? But people are taking trips throughout the day as opposed to those peak AM and PM rushes. And that really means that people who are reliant on transit are doing their daily coordination on transit. They're taking it to go to the grocery store, they're taking it to doctor's visits, maybe they're taking it to the public library or a concert, right? And so these are all assets that we should be focused on as we think about the system we want. Again, thinking about safety, security, and cleanliness. Again, we've seen other places across the country fund transit ambassador programs that have been really helpful. How can we make sure that as we think about funding for the future state of the system, that we're building in some of those opportunities as well? Next slide here. We've also heard that fair integration and affordability is really important, that we have 3 systems. They all have a service called Ventra, but they all have a different monthly cost for those passes. And that as a user of the system, it would be optimal for them to get on, to be able to use their card, but then also let the service boards, the agencies, providers work out how the funding cost allocations work on the back end. We've been talking about regional rail, that European model of rail that shows up maybe 5 minutes past the hour every hour. How can we provide some funding to Metra to be able to do that through this process? And then again, I mentioned a little bit of our transit supportive land use and development patterns as well, that the state should incentivize communities that want to really densify their station areas and think about maybe making those more opportune areas for people to be able to get on transit to facilitate their daily movements. Next slide. Okay, so a couple of highlights. I talked about some of these, so I'll run through them quickly a little bit here, but next slide is at Better Buses. Again, as we think about priority infrastructure, how can we make sure that our road agencies are designing the roads with buses in mind so that the buses aren't just stuck in traffic with the rest of the cars? I know that CTA and CDOT have been working on some bus lanes across the city, but there are places where we should be doing this across the entirety of the region. So as I'm talking to not only CTA, but I'm talking to folks in Will County and in Lake County, there's some opportunities for us to really just be making some transformational changes. Again, thinking about automated enforcement and what that might cost. And so really, as we put this plan together, we were also working with the teams here at CTA to understand what the full cost would be of doing some of these things so that we can be asking for the appropriate amount of money from the General Assembly. Next slide. Again, I won't go into this too much here, but that full fare integration, when you go to other cities around the world, you're getting one pass and you're using it for everything. And, you don't necessarily think a whole lot about it. But here, if you're a Metro user, you buy your monthly Metro pass. And if you're a CTA user, you buy your monthly CTA pass. And so where are there some places for us to be visionary in bringing that together for the public? Again, that does have some capital costs that we wanted to put on the table as well. But then again, thinking about sort of those micro mobility options that could be connected as well, whether it's scooters or Divvy, all of those things are part of this comprehensive mobility system. Next slide. I think I did not touch on this earlier, but I think it's really important that we think about fare levels and affordability. I recognize that all of our service providers, many of us recognize that you all were doing things to be innovative, to attract people back to the system. But in the long run, making sure that the fares are responsive to the increases and the demand and are reasonable, that you're pairing that really with low-income household subsidies at the same time so that you have a market rate price, but then you're also making sure that you have the supportive tools for youth, for seniors, for low-income households across the board. And so we're pairing those two things together because we think it's so important that our transit system does help facilitate and serve more low-income households, getting to more daily needs. And that's really important to the equity of our system here. Next slide. I touched on this too, safety, security, and cleanliness, it costs money. And so we want to be thinking about what it is a cost to make sure that we have the adequate level of staffing, being able to address some of these needs, whether it's cleanliness or whether it's investing in physical infrastructure that might improve the rider experience. Again, thinking around lighting around bus stations and stops, thinking about public restroom access for people across the region and how important that is as well as a part of this conversation. Next slide. Okay, so the fun stuff, how do we pay for this, right? Next slide, please. I think you all are all well aware, but just to highlight here, this really is looking at the revenues to the service boards from 2007 to 2022. You'll see starting in 2020, those red bars there are the federal aid that has been supplementing the operational funding to all of our transit systems here. It comprises about 20% of the fares across the region, but that we need to, that's really what we're looking at solving for when we're talking about state recommendations for funding. Next slide. So to that end, we've been putting together some proposed packages for funding to help address that 20% gap here. Next slide. So part of this includes a number of baseline strategies, things that don't require new net resources, but things that would make a big difference in the operational funding for all three of our agencies. And then we looked at a series of packages, right? What if we're just addressing the $730 million gap? What is that going to take in terms of funding? But really what we've heard from our transit agencies that we shouldn't be talking about that. Nobody wants what we had in 2019. We all want something that's better, that's different, that's more responsive and visionary. So I will focus today on the meaningful investments and the transformational change. Again, those packages both have significant price tags that come along with them. The meaningful investment package is about $1 billion annually in operating funding. The transformational change package, which would incorporate all of the things that I talked about, better bus lanes, ADA accessibility, safety security strategies, would be $1.5 billion annually with some annual capital costs and investments that would come along with this. Again, CTA, Metra, and PACE together is what those numbers are for here. The next slide, I'm going to walk through some of the strategies that we are putting forth to talk to the General Assembly with first and foremost. Those baseline actions you'll see in all of our packages here that we think that there does need to be increased state support for paratransit service to the tune of about $220 million. Right now, what the state provides is about $8 million annually that comes off the top because it's required. But that really, when we look across the country, when we look at other major metropolitan regions, states are providing more financial funding to help their agencies meet those paratransit goals. Excuse me. So we really need to be thinking about fully funding the state and reduced fare mandates, again, unfunded mandates that continue to eat away at the opportunities for the agencies to meet their daily operating needs. That we need to remove the state service fee on the RTA sales tax of about $30 million annually. And again, that we've been talking with our transit service providers to see what cost savings they might be able to bring to the table as well. And that this is through joint purchasing or through fuel purchasing moving forward, is that we think that the transit agencies themselves come up with about $200 million in savings annually based on our conversations with staff at all of the agencies. In addition, we're thinking about what are the durable sources of funding that we should be moving forward with, plus perhaps some diminishing sources of funding as well, but recognizing those diminishing sources aren't things that we can rely on sustainably into the future, but might be a good stopgap measure for us in the interim here. So you'll see things like expanding the sales tax base and lowering the rate. We know that we have very high sales tax rates in the region, rates on goods, but you could expand the sales tax to services to help broaden that base and modernize our tax policy. It's really a statewide conversation. But the opportunity would be, to the tune of about $315 million annually. We also are looking at other new sales tax matches, flowing through some existing formulas, expanding commercial parking taxes in transit-rich areas. One of the things that also does is that, provides maybe opportunities for people to make a modal shift to take transit instead. And then there are some other ideas that we have there, whether it's an in-region vehicle registration surcharge of $5 per car that could go to transit. Again, as we get into those diminishing sources, you could raise the RTA sales tax. The state could choose to raise the RTA sales tax by about a 0.25%. Again, that would come up with about $545 million annually. You could look at tolling and adding an increment on tolling as well. But I think, again, as I lay these out, I want to really highlight the fact that there's not one single source of revenue that is going to help us achieve that $730 million, nor that $1.5 billion. So we are going to be needing the state and the region to look at lots of different options to be able to bring to the table sort of a collection of resources that would help support our transit system operators. Next slide. The meaningful change package, again, includes all of those baseline items. It includes a number of the same durable sources. You could think about, we've got some additional options in here. You could think about maybe an in-region motor fuel tax surcharge at 5 cents per gallon. That would raise about $135 million annually for transit. Again, I know we did just raise the gas tax, the motor fuel tax, and index it to inflation in 2019, the state did. But as we think about, again, how do we help support our transit system? These systems are all very interconnected. And so the idea is that we should use our transportation resources to support our transportation system holistically and not sort of be dividing it up by roads and bridges and transit, but that we need to start thinking comprehensively about it. Okay. I'll keep going then. So next slide. I touched on this a little bit. We want to make sure that we are setting our transit agency partners up for success here. That while we're talking about operations mostly and operational funding, we do recognize that there are some capital investment needs that would have to be met in order for us to achieve some of these things, like full fare integration, for example. The Metra system doesn't have sort of that tap-on system in place right now, so they would need some capital costs to be able to invest in that moving forward. For some of the real-time data information that would have to happen at stations, we recognize that there are hard capital costs to put the fiber in, connect those systems. Again, and there's some ongoing maintenance costs, but we do have some short-term and long-term capital options as well that would help invest. Things like flexing our federal highway dollars to be more multimodal to federal transit dollars across the region, and some very future-focused things like road usage charge as we begin to see our vehicle fleet transition over to be more electric in nature. Next slide. Okay, so part of this discussion has also been about how do we make this happen? What are the structures and what are the responsibilities of our transit agencies? And are there things that we should be looking at in terms of governance to better facilitate this multimodal system here? And so the next slide talks about where we are. So we've been drafting we've explored case studies, drafting reform options, recommendations, and looking at governance models for transit across the entire country and around the world. We right now are refining and finalizing recommendations for our board meeting and our MPO meeting in September and October here. Next slide. So one of the things we wanted to do is really start with some foundational structure for what we were talking about when we're talking about governance. that we need to be thinking about new methods of funding to better align with regional goals, that we need a greater level of centralization of certain functions, that fair policy is the top example of that. But that we should think about sort of regional perspectives and regional governing boards to reduce parochial views of transit issues. But that we also need to provide local avenues for local input. We hear that, you know, stakeholders across the region, whether you're an elected official or whether you're a resident, you want to be able to have that avenue to access board members and the staff at transit agencies. Another top priority, I think, is really going back and looking at this 50% fare box recovery ratio requirement that is set in statute, recognizing that we've got a couple more years of a waiver on this. What is the right method or the right metric that we should be looking at in terms of fare recovery ratios? And maybe not have it, it's the highest in the nation. The next highest one is 30%. And so how can you use it as a tool to do better, but not necessarily have it hamstring the operations and your ability to be responsive to new service markets across the region? Next slide. So when we think about our transit systems, again, there are many different functions that our transit systems provide, whether it's service, funding, there's administrative services, there's fare policy, there's capital services. We were trying to break down sort of what are the functions and what functions would help our region, our transit operators act more like a regional, regionally coordinated effort here. Next slide. So you'll see, you know, this is just an example when we're looking across the country. You can do all of these things very independent, or you can start to think about how you might do them in a more coordinated way. Again, that fare policy, operational funding, these are sort of just on the band of from independent to coordinated, where those things might lay. Next slide. And so we, the good regional planners that we are, have been going through methodically all of the scenarios that we could have in our region. So we looked at minimizing the role of the RTA, but recognizing that doesn't meet our goals and our challenges that we have here. That status quo, we heard from folks, wasn't meeting the needs of today as well. If we could keep the governance structure the same that we have today, the RTA and the 3 service boards, but address the funding allocations. And really those 3 options we've taken off the table, and we're debating a series of 4 options moving forward that fall under the header of improve, having a stronger regional coordinating agency and leaving the service boards, or integrating service boards into a single agency here. So I'm going to walk through those 4 options moving forward, and that's sort of, and then I'll have next steps here. So again, really focusing on these 4 options, that you could have a stronger coordinating agency that would centralize financial stewardship, fare policy, and prioritize capital funding. We've seen countries like in Germany, they've been having this regional network manager model that has been pretty successful for them. So it's the same as that first option, but that you would also centralize capital planning, stated good repair and expansion projects. They would centralize service planning functions related to prioritizing new markets and setting those performance standards, whether it's sort of that fare box recovery ratio or who you're reaching and how fast that service and growth should happen. Let's keep moving because I think the visuals might help us. So again, the stronger coordinating agency really just moves that fare policy from the agency's buckets into stronger regional agency there. But then CTA, Metro, and PACE would still do the bigger
service planning,
day-to-day, and capital planning. The next slide. The regional network manager then has the fare policy, capital planning, funding allocation, and then regional service planning as well. But the agencies would still really focus on the operations, the transit operating, and the daily service decisions. Next slide. Another option that's been on the table and been recommended in future or in past reports is that you would have a regional board or regional entity, and then you would have service committees for Metro, CTA, PACE. We've also heard from the counties across the region that paratransit is really important. They provide a lot of those complementary services to what PACE does today, that they would like to have more coordination around paratransit across the region. And this last model, number 4, next slide, is really sort of what you would do in a region if you could start from scratch. This is probably the most high in the sky, but you'd have a bus division a rail division, and a paratransit division. Again, these are the four options. We think we're honing in on options 2 and options 3 as recommendations to the General Assembly. Both those options provide a whole host of benefits to our region and help us facilitate a stronger coordinated regional agency or regional transit system across our region. Next slide. All right. So we are in the home stretch, the final few months of this work here. We're continuing to have focus groups with stakeholders across the region. We're talking with our counties. We're talking with all the service boards. So thank you so much for inviting me and having me here to talk with you about this today. And coordinating with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus as well. I'm really recognizing that local mayors from across the region do have a role in this conversation. We'll be finalizing the packages for improvement and the funding packages and we are at the moment back at the office. Continuing to narrow those governance options and continue to develop them based on feedback from our board, from the MPO. And that we will have a board and MPO policy committee meeting on September 13th. President Carter does sit on the MPO policy committee and has a vote there as well as all of our other transit agencies, our county board chairs, CDOT, IDOT, RTA as well. So the 13th is really discussion. We'll be providing both bodies with that first draft that we're looking at of recommendations, and then October 11th, we will come back with a final draft with the recommendation that the board and the MPO policy committee pass a resolution of support to send this report to the General Assembly and the governor's office. And then the work really begins, right? That we need to be in Springfield talking about why it's so important that we invest substantially in our transit system. So I think that is it from me from the presentation front. Again, Laura and I are here and happy to answer any questions that you might have, but all of this information is posted on our website, including a number of summary memos and reports and details. And soon all of the full draft will be available on our website as well.
Good. Thank you for your presentation. Appreciate your efforts in formulating these recommendations to address funding challenges in our public transportation system in this region. As the recommendations continue, I hope that equity is first and foremost considered in your final recommendations. I'd like to open it up to any other board members that have any questions or comments at this time.
Director Lee.
Sure, I just have a couple. So thank you for the presentation, very informative and comprehensive. And I like the direction that we're moving towards for more just like a holistic approach to transit. So this is good. Just a question regarding like the bus infrastructure. Are we also considering like the infrastructure around, you were talking about roadways, but are we talking about like also bus stops and like access to sidewalks, these kind of things, like get to the bus stop for accessibility?
Yes, that is also part of the conversation, part of that enhanced, that $1.5 billion we think would bring like, funding to facilitate some of these capital.
Sure. Because you can't stop at just the roads.
Yeah.
Because if you can't get to the bus stop, you're not getting on the bus.
That's right.
Okay. So next question, I guess I'm wondering about the inclusion of like the elevators in the capital infrastructure kind of things, because elevators, as we know, very expensive and like maintenance of such things. And so just wanted to double check that's also being considered.
It is. And so while it may not be enough to on day one, that $1.5 billion wouldn't be enough to address all of the elevator needs and the ADA accessibility needs in the system, it would allow the agencies to plan and create sort of a capital improvement plan where they could make more substantial progress on accelerating their plans for station accessibility.
Like accelerating progress, that's good. So last question, regarding, like, I know you touched on paratransit multiple times, and increasing funding is great, but are we also including considerations for like level of service? Because great that you give them more money, not good that if the service levels are continually bad. So
yeah, I know, Laura, you've been in the weeds on this a little bit more.
It's kind of like we're talking about bus headways, right? It's can you make it what you want, can you actually have the ability to do? And I think a lot of what we talk about with paratransit is making sure that that level of service gets better. I think we talk about with transit in general, like we need to make sure that reliability and frequency are really the cornerstones of any of the transit system. So I do think that we're addressing in there for the, if we want it to be a better system, we're gonna fund it. And going back to that visionary conversation is what do we want, and then how do we fund those versus how do we work with what we've been given, and I think that's the different situation.
Right. It's just been so siloed and fragmented. So if you're just a user of paratransit in one county versus another, it's very frustrating. So I just wanted to double click on that one. So.
And we talk about kind of consolidating that work too. We've got a lot of counties that have started consolidating within their counties, but not counties yet. So it's something we want to move towards.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Director Miller.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. A lot of work been put into it. I'm just kind of wondering though, I know RTA has had a plan and still presenting a plan. How is it merging or how is that, how your plan different?
Yeah, so we started off looking at their strategic plan and really adopting a number of parallel recommendations that they have, like reducing or waiving the fare box recovery fee, but thinking about new ways of funding the system. And what we wanted to do is really, take the next year or two of funding opportunities and dive in a little bit more detail together. So we have built in a number of their recommendations, but we were asked to sort of look at a few things that were beyond what they usually look at in their strategic plan.
Yeah, and I would just add on, I think that I kind of call that the phase one, and we're the phase two is like we build upon their vision and they talk about there's some possibilities for funding. We kind of dive into these are the good policy decisions for funding. So it's kind of like taking their plan and building on it. So I don't think there's anything that's contradictory. We just kind of put more meat on the bones after the in this report.
Thank you.
Director Ortiz.
Thank you for coming and presenting. I think there's a lot of value to having CMAP particularly look at our region and really being able to provide more of a third party perspective to this work. So definitely value that. There's a couple of pieces, maybe the most important one is very much to your point is how is equity being really lived through this entire process, particularly along the lines of, we all know the city of Chicago, the population, and how is that actually being viewed and practiced through both the governance, the funding, and decision-making power of all of the options that are presented, right? So I think our population is very different. The kind of service we provide is very different. The kind of people that we serve is also very different. So I would love to hear more on that and obviously be supportive of any other recommendations that really speak to that. I recognize that CMAP and other agencies respond and are serve a broader range of partners, but to the extent that Chicago is still a bigger factor in all of the different components, I'd love to really see how that is more of a deep dive into what options there are that are clear and that are practical for that to actually be lived in the way this is implemented. The other portion is very much, maybe on the logistics of things. I think there's a lot of information that we on the board receive in terms of the day-to-day information of where are their challenges, where are their gaps, what are the issues, and it would be great to find that knowledge to be also served in a regional aspect versus having all these different people kind of zipped into more specific components. So it would be great to also understand where and how different board members or knowledge or people from the different entities can actually be consistent across various boards or action boards in that sense. And last but not least, I appreciate that this is a document, as we all know, and as planners, we all put our hearts into it. We put all our brain power into it, but it's really going to be a matter of how is it implemented, right? And how much does the General Assembly take on from this to actually take it to action? So if there are any aspects of that we can all be helpful, audience members here can be helpful. I think that is really gonna be the real lift of this work. I think we can all come up with great solutions. But I think just having the actual willpower and the actual action power to get this into action is really the key. So any and all aspects of how do we actually implement any or all of the actions that are recommended would be really helpful.
Great, thanks.
I'm sorry, I can speak.
No, we will come back with some of those ideas too. I think one of the things that just came to mind as you were describing this is oftentimes as planners are like, yes, we've taken the equity, but we really do need to be pulling that out so that people can see, right? I mentioned that we do need to make sure that we have fairs that are, responsive to sort of what different salaries are right across our region. But that for me, $110 monthly CTA pass isn't a big deal, but that we need to be building in the policies where you get to the point of spending your $110, maybe and you spend it in week 3 because you don't have $110 right up front, is that fare capping policy is a required part to make this equitable. I think too, one of the things that's really hamstrung this region is that 50% fare box recovery ratio. It ties the hands of our operators in terms of serving new and emerging markets. And we recognize that 60% of the jobs across our region cannot be done from home. Their service industry, their janitorial, their food and beverage manufacturing, they work in the life sciences, and those are the people that we need to make sure that have access to strong transit, and that you have to build that ridership, right? You have to trust, you have to prove it, you have to have it be there consistently. And it takes a while to get to that 50%. And that is really, I think, one of the huge barriers of inequity that our region has right now, is the state has put that in place, and that it's caused so many places not to be served because it's too risky, right? You aren't going to have the revenue to make the numbers work out on the back end. So we will pull some stuff to be more responsive, but I appreciate your insights in making sure that we're highlighting, and Chairman as well, that we're highlighting equity as we bring this report to the General Assembly and the Governor's Office.
Thank you for all your work.
Director Jacques.
Yeah, plus one to everything we just talked about, so I don't want to pile on here. I have two things that we didn't cover. One is, as I see most of the recommendation, I think we are well in our way in terms of working on those. As you were analyzing some of the data, did you look at the spectrum of where we are today and what the gap is in terms of what's impeding our progress? And primarily to me, it seems like it's leading to funding. And if we had the money, I think most of the programs of the recommendation are already well underway. The Meet the Moment, like most of the reporting and dashboards that at least we see at the board level, we see all of these things being discussed month after month. So I'd love to kind of have that point of view shared as well, to say that, these are things that are already in motion, but there is an impending factor here that's impeding our progress towards where we want to be, right? And then the second part of that is, outside of the ones that we're already working on, from your visionary hat as you wear it, what's something that's like a gotcha or something new that none of us in the room had thought of, right? We would be very interested to hear what somebody else is doing that maybe we could get a head start on. So that's one aspect of just the recommendation. And the second is the land use and development, going back to equity. Like we heard trash cans and how parts of the city is not served the way other parts of the city are served. Just getting a little bit more detail around like how are we thinking about prioritizing what areas we would develop, and like what would specific plan around the use of that land and how the community around it gets more benefited versus people that are coming in and out of that community, right? So how can we bring that lens as well in terms of looking at it holistically? So those would be two of the things that I'd be really interested in, like digging in more.
If I could, I would just say one thing in terms of impeding progress, and maybe Laura, if there's something visionary that you want to think of while I'm talking about,
is that, our transit agencies tout their cost per ride as being one of the lowest across the nation. And that's a good thing, right? But I also think you could flip that on its head and say, we have starved our transit agencies for way too many years. And it's not about that cost per ride being so low. It's about, is that ride actually fulfilling the needs that are there? And maybe that does cost us a little bit extra to have that system that President Carter was talking about, to have the headways that we need. It just does cost money. And so we have to start thinking about, well, how much does it cost to have a fully functioning economy? How important is it that we are investing in, people without vehicles being able to continue to take transit to get to jobs and education, and putting some numbers, some big picture numbers about how that really will make our economic growth here. That's why businesses choose to be here, because we have a transit system that's strong. And so we've been arguing that maybe that's not the right measure, right? Is that we don't want to have the lowest cost per ride because we've been starving ourselves and our system.
I'll just add on to that. I mean, I think, again, most of you know, but when we're out talking through the region and, we've been doing focus groups and working with riders, and the RTA did a lot through transit, the answer to make sure that we have the rider perspective. I think Aaron started with that. What is the rider getting from this? What is the benefit to them? And I think one of the things that we've been hearing as we've been going around, right, is that, and in other communities, is how is everybody else solving this problem? And we're sitting at a system that set up in 1980 of how we're funding this, and we're still using that same system to fund, and thinking about flipping it again is on the head and saying, like, what do we want from the system, and then how do we fund it? And people are doing that differently everywhere. So we've been looking at case studies. New York's going to do court on pricing, right? So you're going to pay a fee when you get into the downtown Manhattan area. That's how they're going to fund their transit system. San Francisco is or San Diego is embarking on this right now of how are they going to look at the funding, and we're starting to have conversations with them. So everybody's in a similar situation, but because of how they've funded the system, they're addressing it differently. And because we've had the 50% fare box recovery ratio, because we have 1983 funding distribution, we are being impacted in a different way. So while, it's not fun to talk about any of these funding pieces, and I think, again, when we've been looking at how do they affect people, how do they affect the rider, what is the equity concern? Because of the situation we've had for the last 30 or 40 years, we're having to deal with this different way than a lot of other people are looking at it. They've paid for it in different ways than we've been able to. It's not even a choice, it's how we've been able to in the last 30 to 40 years. So.
Sorry, last one. On that note, you just helped me think through, like, you put down what would be the investment. I wonder if we can be clear about what would be the benefits of those investments, so that we're able to really tell the story of this is an investment and here are the results, and this is why we're recommending that, to kind of give a bigger picture to people, like this is the end goal that we're trying to go for.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We could have this conversation all day long.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Our next order of business is a report from the Citizens Advisory Board, which will be made by our newly elected chairperson, Tanya Raby, who is present today with our newly elected Citizens Advisory Board Vice President, Rob Johnson.
Morning.
Morning.
Chairman Brad Barclay, members of the Transit Board, and all who are with us today. My name is Tanya Raby, and I'm the newly elected chairperson of the Citizens Advisory Board.
My name is Rob Johnson, and I'm the newly elected vice chairperson of the Citizens Advisory Board.
We are here today to introduce ourselves and to provide a summary of the accomplishments of the Citizens Advisory Board at our meetings on June 29th and August 23rd. I would like to invite our Vice Chair, Rob Johnson, to tell you a bit about himself.
Sure. Morning again. Rob Johnson, and I am currently the Director of Engagement for BOMA Chicago, Building Owners and Managers Association. I moved to Chicago in 2006 to attend law school. Prior to that, I was a military brat, so I consider myself an adopted Chicagoan, not quite bold enough to say full Chicagoan yet. In my career, I've had stints as the legislative counsel in Mayor Rahm Emanuel's office, director of government affairs for the Chicago Housing Authority, deputy commissioner for performance management at Chicago Department of Transportation, and the public policy manager for the Midwest region for Uber prior to my time at BOMA Chicago. Along those ways, I've had various and continued touch points with the Chicago Transit Authority. I consider it a professional highlight, and also personally, the public transit options here in Chicago is a big reason why I call it home today. So to be here in front of you in this role is immense personal privilege, and I'm happy to be an asset to you all, as well as constituents in the city of Chicago.
Thanks, Rob. And a little bit about myself. I am an urban planner and designer, and I am a lifelong Chicagoan. I've been riding the CTA since I was a little one. So it's been a real pleasure to be able to grow up and then, be before you all today as a lifelong CTA rider. I currently am the VP of Planning and Development at Far South Community Development Corporation, which is a nonprofit organization on the very, very far south side of Chicago. We're definitely big supporters of the Red Line extension. As you all know, we definitely look forward to rapid transit service in that area in the very near future. I have experience in working in various levels of government. Most recently, I worked with the Lightfoot administration and worked on various transit and equitable transit-oriented development policy plans, as well as housing policy for the Lightfoot administration. And then prior to that, I was actually working with our colleagues that just left at CMAP, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency, doing a lot of work with them on regional planning, as well as transportation and local planning. So I'm really happy to share my expertise in those fields as well, and be a voice for those who are, of our city, and help to make sure that we are working together to build a stronger and more amazing transit system. And so with that, I'll just go into a quick summary of our previous meetings. So on June 29th, each member of the CAB introduced themselves, so we all got to know one another, which was really lovely. Several key leaders from CTA, including Chairman Barclay and President Carter, had the opportunity to meet with us and greet us, as well as other leaders from a variety of departments. We also received binders with copies of key state statuses, which included the Metropolitan Transit Act, the Open Meetings Act, and a draft copy of the proposed bylaws for the community. And then on August 23rd, we met to elect and to accept the proposed bylaws and forward them to the CTA Transit Board for adoption. We also elected the chairperson and vice chairperson, and Mike Connolly, the CTA's chief planning officer, presented the results from the recent customer service survey. And then Sissa Von Baker, the CTA ethics officer, and her team from the general counsel's office facilitated an ethics training. And so those are pretty much the items that we have accomplished thus far, and we look forward to continuing to work with you and learn from you as we, push forward to improve our experience with CTA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome and congratulations. Recent appointments as chair and vice chair. We all look forward to working with you, learning from you about some of the things that you observe that you can share with this board. as you were talking, I was reflecting, I started in that position myself a number of years. It's near and dear to my heart. So gather as much information and challenge this board to do better. That's what we want you to do, to bring us the tools that will help us, you know, sharpen our efforts to be a better transit system for the city. Thank you very much and welcome. Look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Our next order of business is executive session. My understanding, Kent, that there is an executive session today.
Yes, Chairman, we move to go into closed session pursuant to the Illinois Open Meetings Act, sections 2C11 and 2C21.
I will now entertain a motion to recess into executive sessions for reasons stated by council.
So moved.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller that we move into executive session for the reasons stated by Councilman Ken Ray. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ja. Director Ortiz.
Yes.
Director Miller.
Yes.
Director Lee. Yes. Chairman Barclay.
Yes.
Have to use the check.
Yes. I will now entertain a motion to return to open session. Georgette?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller that we return to open session. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Lee?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Director Ja?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay, the motion to return to open session passes.
Our next order of business. Sorry.
Chairman, would you like me to address item 7A?
Yes, please.
In closed session with respect to item 7A, the board reviewed closed session meeting minutes from June the 16th, 2023.
Thank you, Kent. May I have a motion to approve the closed session minutes for June 16th, 2023?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller that we approve the closed session minutes for June 16th, 2023. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ja?
Yes.
Director Ortiz? Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Lee?
Yes.
The motion to approve the closed session minutes from June 16th, 2023 passes.
Our next order of business is board matters. Georgette, do we have any board matters?
Chairman Barclay, we have 3 board matters on the agenda today. The first is to approve a resolution changing the date of the August 2023 Chicago Transit Board meeting from August 23rd to today, August 29th. The second is to approve a resolution changing the date of our next Chicago Transit Board meeting to September 22nd, 2023. And the third is to approve a resolution adopting the Citizens Advisory Board bylaws.
So we'll take those one at a time. May I have a motion to approve a resolution changing the date of the August 2023 Chicago Transit Board meeting from August 23rd, 2023 to August 29th, 2023?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Lee?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Director Ja?
Yes.
The motion to approve the resolution passes.
May I have a motion to approve a resolution changing the date of the Chicago Transit Board meeting for September 2023 from September 13 to 2023 to September 22nd of 2023?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Lee?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Ortiz? Director Ja?
Yes.
The motion to approve the resolution changing the September 2023 board meeting passes.
May I have a motion to approve a resolution approving the adoption of the Citizens Advisory Board bylaws?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller that the Citizens Advisory Board bylaws be approved. We will take a roll call vote. Director Lee?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Director Ja?
Yes.
The motion to approve the Citizens Advisory Board bylaws passes.
Our next order of business is a report from the Strategic Planning and Service Delivery Committee. Director Miller?
The committee met early this morning, approved the May 10th, 2023 committee minutes. The committee reviewed an ordinance authorizing an agreement with the University of Chicago for the operation of bus routes 171, 172, and 192. That concludes my report, Chairman Barclay.
Thank you, Director Miller. I will now entertain a motion to approve the ordinance authorizing an agreement with the University of Chicago for the operation of bus routes 171, 172, and 192, followed by a roll call vote.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller that the ordinance to approve the agreement with the University of Chicago for the operation of bus routes 171, 172, and 192 be approved. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Lee?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Director Shaw?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Our next order of business is a report from the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget, which I will present in the absence of Director Jakes. The committee met earlier this morning and approved the July 12th, 2023 committee minutes and reviewed the financial report. Committee reviewed 6 ordinances, review of an ordinance amending ordinance 022-141, approving the fiscal years 2023 through 2027 capital improvement program. The review of an ordinance authorizing a license agreement with the city of Chicago to install, operate, and maintain public health vending machines at designated rail stations. Review of an ordinance authorizing an amendment to a retail concession lease for property located at 15 West 95th Street, Chicago, Illinois Red Line. Review of an ordinance authorizing a sublease between Sterling Racing LLC and Development Now for Chicago for property located at 120 North Racine Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. Review of an ordinance authorizing an agreement with City Year Inc. for volunteer service activities. Review of an ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with Cook County for the sheriff to provide groundskeeping and maintenance work on CTA property. Committee also reviewed 10 contracts. The committee placed 6 ordinances and 10 of the contracts on the omnibus. The committee approved and recommended for board approval 6 ordinances and 10 contracts. That concludes the report of the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee. I will now entertain a motion to approve the omnibus at this time.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller that the omnibus from the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee meeting be approved. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Lee?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Director Ja?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Our next order of business is the construction report, but we are deferring that until next week due to some time constraints and not having a quorum possibly. So we apologize for that. Our final order of business is new business. Georgette?
Director Barclay, Chairman Barclay, there is no new business.
Since there's no further business to come before the board, may I have a motion to adjourn the Chicago Transit Board meeting of August 29th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Lee and seconded by Director Miller that the meeting be adjourned. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ja?
Yes.
Director Ortiz? Yes. Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Lee?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you to everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.